Welcome back, everyone. This is Austin right here at 2FC Tactical, and we're going to talk kind of a shorter video because I don't have a ton of history on this particular rifle about post-war Milsurp and what happened to it and why it was done the way it was done. So let's dive into that today. All right, guys. So first off, I really appreciate all of you who tune into our videos, who like, comment, subscribe. If you haven't done so, please do so. Help the channel grow. We're excited to bring you new videos and talk about these historical firearms. And this is what we really get excited about here at 2FC. We're about the older and antique firearms amongst us. We're super excited to share that. Now, with that being said, let's dive into this particular gun here. Now, this is a Type 99 Arisaka. Should not be of any real surprise to any of you. We have done videos on this stuff before. This one is a little bit unique because it's chambered in .308, 7.62 by 5.1 NATO. And it kind of brought up an interesting conversation with the customer that lended us this particular rifle as to, why was this kind of stuff done? Now, us as collectors love our stuff in original and untouched condition. We want the original calibers. We want the original features, parts, accessories, all that, right? That's how we like to collect our guns. But that wasn't always true. And there's a reason for that. Because post-World War II especially, and you got to remember, the whole world went to war in World War II. You got the Pacific front and, of course, the Atlantic front. You've got Germany and Japan. Millions and millions and millions of firearms of various makes, models, calibers were produced in order to fight this global war. And when the war ended in 1945, you have this just absolute stockpile of guns. You have GIs bringing guns back because back then you could do so as trophies. But you also have these nations that a lot of them are devastated, post-World War II, that need money to help rebuild. Or they're not allowed to really have the standing armies that they once had, a la Japan and Germany and maybe in Italy a little bit. And they got these surplus weapons, and what are they supposed to do with it? Quick pause in the video, guys, to give a shout out to our channel sponsor, Patriot Mobile. Now, I've personally been a member of Patriot Mobile for several years now. Everyone is using a cell phone these days. So the question is, why not support someone who supports you, who stands up for the rights that you and I hold dear? And Patriot Mobile puts their money where their mouth is by donating a portion of every dollar they make to the causes that you and I hold dear. They use the same 5G networks that every other major provider uses. You're not sacrificing service. You're supporting a company that will support you. They're going to give our listeners a special discount. Using the code SHALLNOT and clicking the link down below, you will get a free month when you switch to Patriot Mobile. With that, let's get back to the video. Now, most of the money would unfortunately go to those who are corrupt amongst us. That's how it always ends up. But a lot of these nations also needed places to grow. So where was the natural place that they could go park some of these weapons? Well, of course, there's new nations, or I should say freed nations via the end of World War II, say in Africa and the Middle East, the creation of Israel and others, where you saw these new burgeoning nations that needed arms to defend their new territory. Whether it's because you had a nation carved whole cloth out of an area, a la Israel, or the colonial masters of those nations kind of fell apart. We would see that obviously in French Indochina, which is now called Vietnam, Rhodesia, South Africa. You can go down the list, the Congo. There's a whole bunch of countries that would pop up over the years, and they needed arms. And you have all these guns from World War II especially, like this Arisaka. They're just kind of sitting there. They're sitting there in warehouses and floating around, and what do you do with them? You sell them. You sell them to various countries. And I'm sure you've all seen some of the parts kits and military surplus guns that come in from various importers that are out of Ethiopia, Kenya, wherever, right? The other thing, though, that these nations would do is realize that Americans love gun owners. Wow. Another thing you would see these nations do is Americans love their guns. So why don't we just go give them to the Americas? Another thing these nations realized was that Americans love their guns. So why don't we just go sell it to them and they'll buy them? Now, a lot of these people that were in the gun purchasing era of this time, of course, were very familiar with these platforms because a lot of them served the various theaters of war during World War II. But the cartridges, maybe they weren't impressed with. Maybe they were looking for something a little bit more common. Maybe they were looking for something that they already have. So they would take a gun like this one, chambered in 7.7 millimeter, and have it rechambered into something that's a little bit more common or something a little bit more to their liking. Now this one is in the 7.62 NATO cartridge, which is very interesting. A lot of times you would see like 30-06, maybe even 8 millimeter, things that were more readily available. And for instance, the Japanese guns had a kind of reputation of the era of not being particularly great, the calibers. While that's true in the handgun rounds, I found that the rifle rounds seem to work just fine without really much issue, the 7.7 millimeter, if you can find the ammo. That is getting harder and harder to do. But the whole purpose of this was to repurpose these to what we would call just sporters. Stuff that you could use every day, whether it's for hunting, target shooting, or just for mere plinking. The idea is to bring the cost of that ammo down, cost of the rifle down. And there were companies that would form. They would take these older rifles, not this one in instance, and they would take the receivers, get rid of the barrels, the stocks, and everything, and basically craft a brand new gun, sometimes with custom cartridges like Poe Ackley, out of what we would call military surplus guns, whole cloth. So they're just taking existing pieces and transforming it into a modern gun that you and I would use out in the woods hunting deer, for instance. This kind of extended the life of these kind of guns. And the truth is, post-World War II, these guns were dirt cheap. While today it hurts us to think about, something like this being cut up, rechambered, restocked, rebarreled, or whatever is done to it, maybe even a scope mounted to it. Back then, you could get these things for pennies on the dollar because there were millions of them floating around and no one really knew what all to do with them. Arms were advancing very fast post-World War II. It would not be long after World War II, just less than 15 years, to go from bolt-action rifles like this as your standard issue gun to the M16. So it was a very quick advancement of arms. These things were becoming obsolete quite fast. And by rebarreling, rechambering, or reconfiguring it, you extended the life of the gun, and you did so at a really cheap cost. Now, in today's world, that obviously is not true. Today, these things cost more and more money. There's fewer and fewer of them out there. Unfortunately, the sporters keep coming up, like this one, and you hurt a little bit on the inside, but we just need to understand the era of what it was in. In terms of what this gun did, who knows? 308 is a very interesting conversion for a 7.7 gun. It is something that could have served with the military. Who knows? Post-war, there's really no way to exactly know what it did. But that's just kind of why sporters became a thing, and that's really the purpose of this video. We just have to put ourselves back into the era of the 1950s, 1960s, where these guns are readily available. Many of us can go on Facebook or Twitter and go see old ads for these things, and they were selling them for just, a couple of dollars to usually sub $20, in an ad. These things were not expensive, and everyone could have them shipped to their house, pre-Gun Control Act. You could acquire these things quite easily. So then it was just like, okay, now I have it. What do I do? There, of course, were collectors back then, but since these things were everywhere, they weren't looked at as pure collector pieces just yet. That would not really come until later. One of the cool things we see with a lot of these guns is they would end up in movies and pop culture moments. If you ever watched A Bridge Too Far or anything like that, or maybe even when it comes to like airplanes, The Battle of Britain, these films were made so long ago that the weaponry used were actually real ones from warfare that were repurposed as movie props. Obviously, Star Wars repurposes a lot of guns into their stormtrooper guns or whatever. So that these things were just everywhere, and people were just doing whatever they wanted to with them. And that's really what this is all about. This is just like, hey, this is why these things were done with them what they were done with. Not just because people were trying to destroy them. It was just they were just reconfiguring them into the tools they needed at the time because they were cheap to acquire, easy to acquire, and there were millions of them out there. Now, there's still millions of a lot of these out there, but of course the supply keeps drying up faster and faster. People want to collect them. The farther out we get from great historical events like World War II, which drives naturally the price up, and we will continue to see the surplus market increase in price as the years go on. I do hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and continue to tune in here at 2F by C Tactical. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.